I would like to say thank you to everyone who's here watching us today, and thank you to the BBFA, the members of the BBFA collective that are here today. It's Adelaide Damoah, Ayesha, Feisal and Enam Gbewonyo. And we're here today as a wrap-up for Black History Month, October 2020, as well as discussing our most recent show and our most recent collaboration together, Négritude Reembodied, which took place in collaboration with HOXTON 253 Art Space. And I'd like to offer a platform for the artists to be able to talk about their work, their inspirations with regards to the time in which we find ourselves, which is very much a critical juncture in our societal evolution, not only in terms of the month in which we are here representing, but the year in which we are representing. When it comes to Black Lives Matter, when it comes to Black British female artists, and the importance of voices being represented equally. So, who would like to go first?
Depends, are you asking a question?
Right, so what I would like to first do, so in terms of the structure of this particular roundtable, it's going to be quite casual. I'd like the artists to first touch upon their responses to the exhibition, which was co-curated by myself and HOXTON 253 Art Project Space, and talk about what the subject matter means to them now, and also how they see their work and their voice progressing from this point onwards in terms of this very important year, I think. So who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Thank you, Ayesha.
Well, for me, I think this exhibition is very timely, considering all of the events that we've experienced globally through 2020 and the incidents that we've witnessed as a society. And for me, the BBFA and what we represent, it really embodies the spirit of the Négritude movement, and having art as a form of resistance, and using our voices, and for me as well, that connection between the unsung, almost I would say, founders of the movement before the movement was actually given a label, before the term came into being, were the female, there were sisters, the Nadal sisters, and quite often, they were overlooked in the history books. And, the fact that they were females and their thoughts and their ideas inspired the movement a good 10 years before it came into full being. So for me, really being able for us to come together at this time and still be able to put on an exhibition, be able to raise our voices as female Black British artists, it's very timely for me.
Amazing, thank you. That's part of the reason, one of the driving forces, in fact, for inviting members of the BBFA to participate in this show, because I personally, and also with the Art Project Space, couldn't think of any collective within our circle that could convey this message at such a poignant time. Mm-hmm. So thank you again for accepting the invitation, and thank you for all of your hard work and your passion that's gone into the writing and the production of this show. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Exactly. I think we are definitely deeply in debt to you for giving us this space and to be able to display works that are very poignant to this time, but also, like Ayesha was saying, really taps into the kind of backstory of the Négritude movement, in that, these two sisters, Jane and Paulette, really kind of led the way and led the thinking around it. And it's very much kind of, the crux of what the collective is about, in the fact that we are here trying to raise a platform for Black British female artists, because they have been overlooked. There are only a few that you can really think have had some, success. but there are so many of us across the UK making fantastic work that's really important, speaks to, you know, this time, but speaks to our experience as black women who, you know, are from the diaspora and, you know, are kind of trying to feel through their dual identities, their womanhood, like what it is to be black and to be British, and saying it in such kind of beautiful and sometimes very subtle ways. And so it was just so beautiful to be able to have that space to kind of have those conversations. And I think our work really speaks to that in our very individual ways. So it's just so beautiful.
I mean, I will go back on just to give you the opportunity to speak about the work that you actually had in the show, which I think is quite important for the viewers to hear about. But thank you.
I think it's really important to say that for me, the Négritude movement, when I was really reading and studying about it, I started with Aimé Césaire's notes on a return to my native land. And in that, what he does, which is so significant and so important to the now, is that he specifically goes back to this native land and wears various different masks to try and encourage... Okay, actually, I need to give some backstory first. Aimé Césaire was from Martinique, which is a French Caribbean island. And so it was colonised by the French. And the one thing that's really important to note is that in the Caribbean at that time, we're talking about the 1920s and 30s, in the Caribbean at that time, there was no African pride. There was no sense of pride in terms of where they had come from, in terms of the history of slavery, because of the colonisers had broken that connection, and the colonisers had encouraged the people to feel like they were superior actually to Africans. So in this extended poem, what he does is he goes back and he sees this disconnect with Africa and this lack of African pride, and he's trying to encourage the people to have that by wearing different masks. And the poem is quite a surreal poem, so it can be a bit difficult to grasp, but ultimately what he does is he gets to a point at the end where every mask he wears is disappointed in the outcome, and he gets to a point in the end where he comes to a point of self-reflection, understanding of his history and where he's come from, and self-acceptance, and encouraging the people to understand the history of slavery, to understand the history of the colonisation and the damage that it's done, but at the same time to accept who they are in the now and to be proud of that. Whether they came from an African king, whether they came from slaves, whether they came from whoever they came from, be proud of their blackness and be proud of their history, and also to learn from that history, going back to something that is at the core of my practice, which is the Ghanaian concept of Sankofa, which is, it means it's the literal translation, it is not wrong to go back and pick up that which is forgotten, which translates into, it's important for us to understand our history such that we do not repeat the same mistakes from the past in the present. So for me, that idea really embodies Négritude, and Négritude is really it's a philosophy, it's a lifestyle, it's a way of being in the world.
It's an essence.
It's an essence which is so important to identity and to that feeling of pride, so that we can move forward positively in the world. And I think that has never been, in my lifetime, more important than now. Yeah.
Thank you, Adelaide. So, what I would like to do is bring us back to the show and to look at the artworks which you recently presented as part of Négritude Reembodied, and tell us a little bit about your reasons why, I guess, and how it made you feel to see your works aligned with this subject matter right now? Who would like to go?
All looking at it.
I mean, I'm looking at Enam simply because I think one of the works, well, a couple of the works that you had, like Minute, and just talking about your grandmother during the show, I think it would be quite interesting to start from there.
Yeah. So the works that were on show were all part of my current body of work, which is titled Nude Meat Under the Skin. And it all stems from this pair of tights, which you might ordinarily look at and not think, okay, I don't understand where the relevance comes. But the inspiration really started from the fact that I'd started to see nude tights for women of colour. There were brands that were starting to create these nude tights for black women and women of colour. And for me, that was the first time that I was seeing this, in my late 30s and having always worn black tights. And it just started making me think about how we are erased so much in so many different ways as black women, and specifically in the fashion industry. So my background is that I actually worked as a fashion designer before coming back to becoming an artist. So my background is textile design. And so I was just thinking about the fact that this is a really, simple product that's part of most women's wardrobe if you live in the West, and the fact that for something as simple as this, we were still erased, we still were not valued, there was no place for us, and how that made me feel as a black woman. And I'd never really stopped to think about that, and it really hit home to me how there's so much about, our kind of daily life living in the West that we don't realise affects us, because you never stop to think about it. We're always on the go, we'll just find another way to deal with it, like wearing black tights. But actually, all of those things, really affect your mental health, and the fact that, it's basically saying that you have no value, you have no worth, and so we are not going to create space for you. And so I really wanted to start looking at the history of this product and see how that intersected with black women and what those effects were. And so I charted its history all the way back to its first iteration, which would be stockings, and linking it specifically to British history and the fact that around the 1800s, when slavery was at its height, was when classicism really became, the way of life here, and you displayed your wealth through your clothing, getting your portrait painted. And so you have all these portraits hanging in, big museums and galleries in the UK of these British gentry wearing their stockings that are either made of silk or cotton, but it doesn't talk about that unspoken history of where that wealth came from. Most of them would have had some tie to the slave trade. That's how their wealth was generated. And it was black women and men working on those plantations, growing that cotton that was spun into stockings. And so I just kept kind of tracing the history and really kind of starting to think about the generational trauma that's passed down, within our community.
Yes, genetics as well.
Exactly. And so the work then also started really becoming about how we heal from that. And so performance also became part of this story, because I started looking at the ballet industry and how for black ballerinas and ballerinas of colour, they also, obviously they can't find tights to match their skin tone, and so they have to dye their tights and they have to pancake their shoes. And just that physical act of having to create that visibility for yourself. And again, it's that way of trying to find a way through. All of these things start to erode at your sense of self. And it became very personal to me, because I was thinking about, how I've struggled with my identity, I've struggled with my womanhood. Like Adelaide was talking about, you have these kind of dual identities, you don't really know what your true sense of self is and your self-worth. And I started thinking about, generationally, there would have been a time in my ancestry where, one of my great-great-grandmothers wouldn't have known this idea of having to assimilate to Western beauty standards. How would she have stood in her blackness, not even equating it to blackness, because she wouldn't know any difference. She is a woman, that's all she would know. So trying to tap into that confidence and that sense of self and that self-worth, and bringing that back to this present time, and then trying to, in a way, kind of create a safe space to continue to exist in that sense of self, because as we live now, we're still being bombarded with, you know, these ideas of what blackness should be. And I mean, this year specifically, with the Black Lives Matter movement again coming to a head, it just really hits home how much we are subjugated and made to feel othered and lesser. And it's a difficult existence to continue to like really stand in your confidence and just be. So the work is very much addressing all of those things, but also trying to carve out space for that healing and to try and find that true authenticity and that true sense of self. And so yeah, it really kind of is just such synchronicity with what, you know, our ancestors, our forefathers were doing in the 1930s. But it also is a little sad that, you know, we're still having these conversations. And as much as, you know, things have moved on, we definitely enjoy much more freedoms than, you know, our ancestors have. At the core of it, those issues are still the same, and they're very structural and very institutional. And working within the art space, we definitely, you know, understand that, you know, the barriers that we have to kind of overcome to
institutional battles.
Yes,
very relevant. So yeah, so just going back to looking at, you know, the institutional phantoms that we are still very much less than 100 years on. It's still a topic. It's still a conversation. I mean, I guess the fact that we are able to speak is worth something. So I think, how do we move on from this, essentially? You know, this is like I said previously, we are at a critical juncture. We are at a point, a turning point, not only within our industry, within our respective industries, within the arts, within the creative, but societally. Yeah. Like this is a pan socio-economical shake-up. Yeah. And so in the next, say, not 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but in like the next 10 years, for the next generation, do we expect to be still speaking about this, or do we want to see, what do we want to see from this? I mean, like, it's not even about legacy at this point, it's about moving forward. Yeah. Because at the moment, it's like the ticker, it's like, but there's no progress. There is progress, but it's not, what do we want to see for the next generation? You know, that's what's really important, because we can't have another 100 years of still talking about this. There has to be there has to be, and 2020 has not only been a shake-up for the world, but for absolutely
like a reset. I feel,
Yeah, but it's that's the thing. It's like in a lot of elements that reset is quite necessary.
Exactly.
As well. But I think it's important not to look subjective, but objectively about what is occurring, and you know, our vision is only as far as our knowledge. Yeah. So in order to expand our vision, we need to expand our knowledge.
Absolutely.
And so taking, you know, the writings of our forebears, what history has repeatedly tried to tell us, we need to listen now, okay? Because we can't keep saying the same thing and nothing being done from that, beyond that. So, I don't know, Ayesha.
Yeah, I was thinking, for me, the idea in Négritude of art being a revolt, for me, my work is concerned with the psyche and, you know, the study of human behaviour, and I really feel that creativity is a form of empowerment. And for me, the works that I have in the show, there's a piece that I have called The Saving Grace. And I mean, most of the works were completed during the lockdown period. And really much at a time when, for me, I was looking at our relationship with technology, how we see ourselves, and I was looking at organic forms as well. You know, during the lockdown period, I was doing a lot of gardening, looking at the cycle of life, and it was almost on the flip side of that, looking at technology as well, and how our devices became almost like our lifelines, you know, and they almost became like an extension of ourselves to the point that you know, we were using them for all aspects. It was our entertainment, it was our communication, it was, you know, the constant Zoom calls. It was everything, you know, to the point where it felt like our own energies and the frequencies that we're experiencing through, you know, artificial intelligence. It's like it was all starting to merge, and not only that, we were being shown through technology these incidents that were, you know, that we could no longer ignore, things that were happening, you know, things were being shared at the, you know, the drop of a hat. Everything was instantaneous, and it was like, you know, things that we have been speaking about for years. It's almost like it came to a point where there's just no ignoring this anymore. People are tweeting about it. There's videos. There's, you know, it's got to a point where these conversations, you know, are happening, and it's almost, you know, for me, just having a voice, you know, being creative, and through our work being able to manifest. It's also holding up a mirror to society as well, and looking at, well, you know, we have all of this technology, we have all of these things. How are we going to use it? You know, what is it that we're going to do in our society moving forward? You know, it almost felt like there was a shift, for me anyway, like an energy shift. This 2020, it's like the pandemic has forced people to, you know, to a point where we've had to kind of like slow down our roll a bit. We've had to, you know, the kind of rat race and the kind of lifestyles, you know, being in a space where you're kind of forced to kind of be still and maybe you reflect. So
process.
Yeah. Exactly.
We don't allow time to process it.
Exactly.
Because we don't even try to remember things anymore. It's just like, what was that? Oh, let me just Google it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, process.
Yeah.
The long soak.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So for a lot of the works, it was really for me exploring that idea as well, that our physiology is actually changing. You know, our brains are developing differently because of the way we're now interacting with technology. So kind of the whole kind of that side of things, along with the organic and the, you know, I really had this, me personally, I had this real need to ground during this period, and this real need to kind of earth and kind of bring the outdoors, you know, inside, and really kind of like put my hands in soil, and just it was such a strong feeling, and I think, you know, it's that whole kind of that the energy, you know, and for me it just felt like this year it kind of like, and even like 2020, you know, just like 2020 vision, so many things just came into focus, and so many things, it's almost like there's a balancing, you know. But one of the things, you know, that we're looking at is, well, where do we go from here? What are we going to do? What are we going to learn from all of this, and how do we move forward?
Moving forward, and actually having a say in how you move forward. That's crucial to how you expand as a human being, how you progress within your career. It's like, how do you like want to move forward? What is your voice in all of this? So there's a lot of noise, you know, and I hope that this, not only this exhibition, but the body of work and the progress you'll make as practitioners will only invest in that and make your voices louder, because there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
But we need to focus. Yeah. Thank you, Ayesha.
To the work.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had one piece which was from an old, well, there were two pieces actually, the video plus the performance piece, which was from an older body of work from 2018, and then I had four works from a series that I just completed during lockdown, and there's a thread that connects all of them, which I'll explain in a sec. But to the performance piece first, So in 2018, I was preparing for a solo exhibition called Genesis, and I decided to, or I came up with this idea for a performance, which was, it was called My Body is Present, homage to Enam. And Enam was a Cuban artist who was, I suppose, transported from Cuba to America in the, so she was born in 1946, same year as my mum, that's how come I remembered. I'm not that much of a geek, yeah, but I am. But yeah, she was born in 1946, so she moved when she was, I think she was before the age of 10, and so she always felt this sense of disconnect with her identity and her Cuban roots. So a lot of her work involved using land art and body performance to kind of reconnect herself and root herself somehow. And so I really connected with that. And I've been obsessed with her performance work for a long time. She died in 1985 by falling 33 stories to her death. Some people speculate it was her husband, the artist Carl Andre, who pushed her. That idea got thrown out of court because there wasn't enough evidence. However, people still suspect that to this day. He's gone on to become a very successful artist. So I, on doing my research, discovered that the artist Nancy Spiro had a connection with her. They were friends, they were both feminists. Enam kind of separated from that group because of her seeing herself as or her being a woman of colour, and her not connecting with the sort of white feminist ideas of the time. So she kind of separated from that group, but they remained friends. So after she died, Nancy Spiro did her own homage to Enam. And that performance that she paid homage to was called Blood Signs Body Tracks, and it involved her coating her hands in blood red paint and dragging herself down a canvas in front of an audience and leaving them to contemplate the idea of life, death, the universe, and all of these existential sort of things. That was a really important performance for her, and it was a really striking performance for me. It really impacted me, and so the piece that I came up with was a 33-hour durational performance piece, which involved me repeating that same action over and over and over again for a total of 33 hours. 31 of those hours were done in my studio to and they were broadcast over Instagram Live and the other one on Twitter, whose name I've forgotten. There's another live streaming... Periscope, exactly. So the idea behind punishing myself in that way, because it was like a punishment, it was like torture for 31 hours. I always fast before I do performances. I also channel my ancestors, one ancestor in particular, which I'll get onto in a second. And the idea was really to, aside from, to really talk about struggle of being a woman, struggle of being a black woman, struggle of this dual identity in this country, also to try and push my body to see how far I could go, to see what I would learn after that struggle, to also, I suppose, meditate on how one can grow from suffering and how black people have grown from suffering historically and how we continue to. And it's kind of ironic and weird and serendipitous that at the time that I was doing this performance, my younger sister was really struggling. She was really suffering. She had recently, she was at that moment of the performance in surgery, a major surgery. She had ulcerative colitis. She was in major surgery to have a large part of her intestine removed. I was going to cancel the performance, and my dad said, absolutely not. There's nothing, you're not a surgeon, there's nothing you can do for your sister. Go and do the performance. When you finish, you go and be there for your sister. And she would not be happy with you if you cancelled the performance in the first place. So that's what happened, and as soon as the performance finished, what was weird was that the performance finished at, so it started at 10 a.m. on Saturday, finished at 5 p.m. on Sunday, and I called my dad to find out what was going on with my sister. He said she'd just come out of surgery just that minute. So I ran to the hospital to see her, and she was just out of surgery, so she wasn't fully lucid, but she was lucid enough to tell me that if I had cancelled it, she would have killed me. So that's an aside, but it's a really important part of the story of that performance, and that thinking and intentionally putting myself into a situation where I was struggling and I was suffering, which is also a metaphor for what I've been through and how I came to be an artist in the first place, which is another thing. That's just going to make the whole thing too long. But going to the other works that were in the show, the other works were made during lockdown, part of my response to the situation, and it came on the back of a solo show that I had with Boogie Wall Gallery, and they asked me to do a performance to close the show, and that performance involved me really thinking about what I had been through and what the world had been through during the lockdown period, and what the conclusion of that was. I don't know that it's necessarily a conclusion, because I think it's ongoing. It's ongoing.
Research.
Exactly, but it was a revaluing of the self. It was an inward turn, right, to understand everything that had happened that led us up until that point, and then understanding that changes needed to be made, and those changes needed to come from within. And so the performance title was Revaluing the Self. And the performance itself involved the recitation of a poem that I wrote that included lots of mythology and metaphor for everything that had happened up until that point. And it also involved a call and return and a thanking of the ancestors. Halime produced it. She was also involved in the beginning of the performance. This call and return to the ancestors, then after I finished the poem, I then consecrated some artworks and named them sacred sumanas and imbued them with positive energy, so that whoever would then go on to own those artworks would then activate those energies and bring those positive energies into their lives. So I suppose in a similar way to Enam, but different, some kind of healing ritual that was involved in that performance, which was important for me and meant something to me. But the works that were in the show were not involved in the performance, but they were a part of that body of work. And I used images of those ancestors that I'm referring to. The main one being my great-grandmother, who was born in I don't know when my great-grandmother was born. I know when my grandmother was born. She was born in 1920. The images of my great-grandmother, who was a really striking, tall lady, really beautiful. I don't know anything about her aside from her name. And in this photo, she's holding my grandma, who's a baby, in the year of her birth. And it's an image that is reminiscent of mother and child, in this case, almost like a religious image. And I've used that image repeatedly in my work, I don't know how many times, to the point where I'm almost mythologizing her. And every time I do a performance, I pay homage to her, I channel her. She is my conduit, yeah. And it's actually Halime who pointed that out to me, because she asked me, in another performance I did a while ago, she asked me after, do you remember, that we went to eat, and she asked me, who are you channeling when you do these performances? Because you're clearly not you when you do them. Yeah. And I said, I go somewhere I go somewhere, I definitely go somewhere in my head. And then she looked at me and she said, "It's Amma."
Yeah.
So at that point, I started intentionally doing that for every single performance. So anyway, that image is so significant to me. It means a lot to me. And it's the image that really got me thinking about our colonial history and British colonialism in the context of my work, and really started to investigate that from an academic perspective as well, and really put that into my work. So that image, plus an image of her mum, which was taken at some point during the 1800s, we don't know exactly when, which to me is extraordinary, considering we're talking about Gold Coast, formerly Ghana, which when photography was only invented like a few decades before, probably maybe even 1 or 2 decades before.
Well, photography that we know to be patented and invented.
Exactly. So here are my ancestors looking regal, you know, and it's her parents in this image. But and that series of works, the first time I've used a cyanotype.
Yeah.
I've never used cyanotype before. I've done lots of image transfer works before, at various different techniques of image transfer. This is the first time I've used a photographic, an old photographic technique, cyanotype. So those images are used over and over again in that work, and then there's gold to reference Gold Coast and that colonial tying to colonialism. So yeah, that's a summary of the work that's in the show, and I think it really ties in perfectly with the concept of negritude and the philosophy of negritude that I explained at the beginning.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess in terms of how the show unfortunately it saddens me it has come to an end. However, you know, the legacy does live on. We do have a catalogue and we're happy to share all of the information regarding that. But now that the show has closed, and with the feedback that you've received from your peers, and just the time, like, we're wrapping up Black History Month, but of course 1 month isn't enough to talk about the important work that you're doing as practitioners. So what's next for you after this show, I guess? Really? Like, what are you up to?
It's non-stop, which we definitely have to be thankful for in this, moment in time. So I actually am running to a show directly after this. It's a one-day show. It's Black Minds Matter, who I collaborated with to do an online workshop. So Black Minds Matter was set up to support people within the Black community in their mental health. And Onome Otiti, who's a really amazing textile artist, had curated this run of workshops that promote how craft has healing benefits and can be a tool to kind of just help you work through, just trying to come to a point of healing and mindfulness. And so they've now invited us to exhibit some work. So that's just a one-day exhibition at Sophie T, and then really, really excited, because it's always been a dream of mine to show work at Saatchi Gallery. I've been invited to exhibit some works with Delphian Gallery. Thank you so much. That opens next week, Thursday, sorry. But outside of that, it's in the studio, and I'm saying in the studio because I've actually been super lazy over the whole lockdown period and been working at home rather than going to the studio, because it's a bit of a mission to get to the studio, and also being a textile artist, I can just sit and stitch and knit at home and just be comfy in the wall. But I'm intentionally going to the studio because there's a lot of work that I want to investigate, kind of building it into more sculptural works. So I won't say anything more, but watch this space. I'm really excited about that, but also developing the performance body of work as well. And one of the main things I'm really excited about is that I'm continuing to develop this series of workshops. And that's something that has been really important for me to start rolling out. And I was kind of really motivated by this period, just having personally just experienced that trauma of everything that we're going through with the pandemic, but also with Black Lives Matter, and using my craft, my practice as a way to find that space for healing. So I'm wanting to create spaces for Black women to experience that, but also to have intergenerational conversations, because I think that is so important. And that's one of the things my work facilitated with my mother, and just learning about her experiences as a young woman moving to the UK and having to deal with racism when it was, quite traumatic here. And again, going back to what I was talking about with generational trauma, thinking about how, those experiences would have passed down to me, and the experiences of her mother. And so just finding that space for Black women to come together, have those conversations, and start to try to find that space for healing.
Thank you very much, Enam. Ayesha?
For me, really, as I said, these works were just, I feel like they're just scratching the surface. I've got so many ideas and things that I want to explore and, get out there. So for me, I really want to kind of lock myself down in the in the studio and actually, get around to executing and developing the ideas that I have. So that's what my focus is for the time being.
Amazing. Hello.
You know what I thought you were going to do. Sorry. Have to be professional. It's a strange time because obviously the whole lockdown period has been massively traumatic, but at the same time it's been like a rebirth, right? And I'm so grateful that despite all of that, there have been ridiculous opportunities coming out of the work. Seriously, it's been so such a blessing. So just coming out of 154, my first time ever showing 154, and thank you. And it was amazing to be shown in 2 galleries, and that was my first time.
Yeah.
And in this year as well was so significant to me. It really meant a lot. But coming off the back of that, I'm now working with 2 galleries. I've just been asked by Flowers Gallery to submit some works, or to give 2 works for upcoming Small is Beautiful exhibition opening in November. Thank you. And also the RWA, I'm an RWA, Royal West of England academician. The open exhibition is going to be opening in a few weeks. So literally just this morning they came to take the works for that. And aside from that, there was obviously just working in the studio, building upon the body of work that I started over lockdown, and also really digging into my Confronting Colonisation project, phase 2. So really digging into that project and doing an academic deep dive into that work and the materials that I've got that are feeding into that work, which will ultimately lead to an even more crazy durational performance, which I'm working with the lovely Halime on. So that's out there in the world now, so you can't back out. So exciting stuff. Really excited about the future, but apprehensive and cautious at the same time, and hopeful and scared. And all these kind of
transmute the fear into excitement, the nerves into excitement, anticipation.
But that's not the fear. The fear is, I'm not talking about the fear of the work.
It's the fear of what's coming next.
Exactly. With all this coronavirus business, we don't know what's going to happen. That's the thing that is, that The work I can control, like when it comes to, you know what I do when it comes to performance. Like that, as soon as I get those butterflies, that fear, that gets transmuted into power and agency, you know. So that's like, I've got that unlocked, don't worry about that. But it's the stuff that we can't see and control, and all of that stuff.
It's a bubble time.
Every day you wake up and there's something else. Like imagine that. I remember what I was doing when the George Floyd video. I was lying in my bed and I got a thingamajig on YouTube for this video. I clicked on the video, there was no explanation of what the video was, and I saw the thing happening, and I was like, they've killed him, you know. So so I pray that no more of those kinds of instances happen. So that's the thing. That plus the coronavirus and whatever other kind of funky diseases and viruses are out there in the world. That's the fear thing. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And this mad person in the White House currently.
It's global reset. We're in the throes of global reset. But what we do now will dictate how we move forward.
Absolutely, yes.
You know, so it's about steadying your ground and getting ready to respond. It's not about being reactive. It's about reacting. It's different. I mean, ladies, it's been an absolute honour for me to collaborate with the BBFA members of the BBFA collective as well. And in terms of, you know, not many people know, but those who actually do know, they know for a reason. I've been very active in the fields of social justice for very, very many years. I'm a native Londoner, born in Cyprus, former colony of Britain. And I've grown up in southeast London. I've grown up within the predominantly black and coloured community. I've cut my teeth on the cloth of this city. And so for me, when I have the conversation with people about, I don't see colour, it's like, no. I do see colour. I see what you have to deal with every day. When you go to pick out your tights, when you look in the mirror, when you walk down the street, when someone crosses the street, I see you, okay? And one of the reasons why it's really, really important for me to... I'm actually honoured more than anything to have been able to represent members of the BBFA collective in bringing this subject matter to life as well. And it's not easy, and I've had many, over the years of being an active producer as well, I've had many people say, whether directly to me or not, is she black though? So, no, I'm not, but I see. And it actually drove me to write a poem. So it's part of an ongoing body of work, like Through the Gaze of a Londoner. It's like a Londoner in real time, and it's part of the essay a short introduction in brief that I wrote for the show, which is online, and I hope you...
It's in the catalogue?
It is in the catalogue. But it's been an absolute honour and a treat to work with these ladies and to work with HOXTON and 2x3 Art Project Space as well. But, you know, one thing that I emphasised in my writings, and one thing that I don't make very vocal, but I'm not coming from a place of ignorance. I'm part of the fabric of this city.
I can testify.
But aside from that, the work that we're doing is so important in terms of representation. And, you know, where I can and where possible, like I'm head of comms for the Alumni of Colour Association. I've for years advocated, and I don't need to go on about this because those who know, they know. But I think it's important that I say, I see you. And thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.